Um, and Yo-Yo is going to share tips and tricks at the very end. So be sure to stay to the very end so that you can see how she went about her research for the universities that she applied to. Without further ado, Yo-Yo, please take it away.
Okay. So hello everyone. I'm Yo-Yo, and so today I'll be talking about how to select UK universities for your UCAS application. So Alex said just now, but a little bit about myself. So I was the student speaker to represent my graduating class. I got 8.5 out of 9 on the IELTS examinations, which is an English proficiency test, which I'll talk about a little more later. And I applied to 5 universities in the UK, which is the maximum amount you can apply through UCAS. And I was accepted to London School of Economics, University College London, King's College London, and the University of Edinburgh. And I also took the Oxbridge Thinking Skills Assessment, which I will also be touching upon later. And I was invited to an interview at the University of Oxford. I also applied and was accepted and offered scholarships and advanced standings to the University of Toronto, UBC, and the Chinese University of Hong Kong. I completed the entire application process independently without help from external agencies, and so I really do have a clear understanding of the application process for UK schools, schools in Hong Kong, and also in Canada. And also as a peer tutor and Model United Nations delegate mentor, I'm confident that I am able to guide your kids through their entire application procedure for UCAS. So without further ado, let's get into it. So what I'll be covering today is... Yeah?
I don't see your presentation.
Oh, seriously? Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yes, no worries.
Okay. Apologies. Do you see it now?
Yeah, we can see you.
Okay. Apologies. So the topics I'll be covering today is firstly a short introduction to UCAS, and then I'll talk about what to consider when making your 5 choices as your university choices, and where and how to do the right research. So the last 2 parts are most important, so be sure to stay till the end. So firstly, UCAS. What is UCAS? So UCAS basically it is the Universities and College Admissions Service, which is a UK-based organization that operates all application processes. So basically, any student studying for an undergraduate degree in the UK has to apply through UCAS through a single online submission. So one UCAS submission online can get you into 5 universities. So this is the official website there. You can go check it out at a later date. So these are some of the major dates and deadlines. They haven't changed in the past couple of years, so they're unlikely to change. So first is 5th of September, which is already passed. So this is when the application submissions open. And application submissions are all the way open until 15th October, 6 UK time. So this is the application deadline for all Oxford and Cambridge courses, and also most courses in medicine, vet school, science, and dentistry. And on 15th of January, 6 UK time, that's the application deadline for the majority of the rest of the courses. But some art and design courses have a later application on the 24th of March. But take note that there are also some arts and design courses which have their application deadline on the 15th of January, so you'll have to check there. And also, even if you applied for either Oxford or Cambridge, you can still fill in your 4 other spots for the UCAS application before the 15th of January. So what the UCAS application consists of are basically these 4 things. So firstly, you have to fill in your personal details, qualifications, and course choices. Then you have to write a personal statement. Then you have to have a reference. And at the end, you pay an application fee. So for one choice, you pay £18. But if you make anywhere between 2 to 5 choices, you pay £24. So it's usually recommended that you make 5 choices because it's one application submission anyway, so there's no extra work involved, and you get a lot more choices to choose from at the end. And I put a link to the official UCAS guide on YouTube to for how to fill in the application. The entire process is done online and it's very much straightforward. So if you have any uncertainties, watching the video will probably make it really clear to you. But just to make it easier, I'll talk a bit about the entire application process through a couple of screenshots now. So first, as I mentioned before, you'll have to put in your application personal details. So this is very straightforward. So your name, sex, and things like that. Then you have to write down your choice details. So these are the courses and universities that you want to apply to. And then after that, you have to fill in all your relevant education. So any primary schools, secondary schools, and high schools that you attended. Take note that this will not affect your application whatsoever because there are so many schools worldwide. And when the people at the university see it, they only see a code for your school, and so they won't actually know the school. Then comes the personal statement. So the personal statement is a little piece about yourself, anywhere between 0 to 47 lines and between 1,000 to 4,000 characters. So when you type that up single-spaced on a Word document, that's a little bit more than half a page. And so what the personal statement is that it basically gives a personal touch to your entire application. So through the personal statement, you can let the university know what kind of person you are and your personality. So what's special about the personal statement, though, is that different universities are looking for different things in your personal statement. So for example, Oxford and Cambridge, they look for a more academic take on your personal statement. So in your personal statement, they want to see how you do academically and why you're so interested in their subjects. So whereas for schools like the King's College London or for let's say the University of Manchester, what they're looking for more is what kind of person you are, your personalities, your hobbies, any extracurriculars you do, instead of anything that's more academic. So for example, when I applied for UCL and Oxford were my first choices. And for both of these schools, what they were looking for was something that was more academic. And so since I applied to human geography, so I talked about my MUN experiences in school and the fact that I really like to stay up to date on the news and how I like to know about current events and the articles I wrote for newspapers and magazines in Shanghai. And I didn't really talk about my hobbies such as playing the violin or playing the piano because they weren't really into looking at that. They just really wanted to know why I like to study geography and what I have done outside of school that adds to me academically. And so since you're applying to 5 schools most likely, you obviously can't tailor one personal statement to all 5 schools. So what I recommend you to do is to tailor your personal statement to your first and second choices like I did, and the rest of the schools will probably like your statement too. So how do you make your 5 choices? So these are the simple guidelines that most people follow to ensure that you will have a university to go to at the end of the day. So it's recommended that you pick 1 dream university, 2 reach universities, and 2 safety universities. So dream universities are universities that are hard to get into. Reach universities are universities that if you do according to how you do academically now, so nothing much changes and your grades stay rather consistent to your predicted, then you will most likely get into these schools. And safety universities are universities that have lower requirements than how you're performing now at school. And so even if you don't do as well as you hoped in your final exams, you'll most likely still get into these 2 universities. So what dream and reach and safety universities people apply to really depend on the person. So if you do very well academically, your dream and reach universities might be really good universities. Whereas if you're less good academically, or like if your grades are not as well as others, then your dream and reach universities would obviously be different. So for me, I actually did not follow this guideline because other than going to the UK, I was also really okay with going to Canada. So what I did was I picked one dream university, which was Oxford, and then I picked 4 reach universities, which were UCL, KCL, LSE, and Edinburgh. And I actually put all my safety universities in Canada, so UBC and U of T. And so I was thinking that if I didn't do well, I would go to Canada. But this is the general guideline. So after talking about all that, so how do you pick your university? What factors do you need to consider? That's the most important part, right? So I've split all the criteria that I thought about into essential and recommended criteria. So in essential criteria, firstly, obviously, you have to look at the program requirements. So these are the grades that are specified and the subjects that you have to take for the university to even consider you as a student enrolling in their major. So for example, for UCL Human Geography, my program requirements were that I had to achieve a 38 out of 45 in my IB exams. And also I had to get a 6 in geography, HL. And then also I couldn't get a grade below a 5. And then next, you have to look at the acceptance rate. So the acceptance rate is basically the ratio between the number of students that apply and the number of students they take in a year. And so this can really indicate to you how easy it is to get into the university. So a school with a very low acceptance rate, like Oxford and Cambridge, would probably be your dream university. And a school with a very high acceptance rate would probably be more of a safety university. Next, you have to look at any extra examinations that you require. So extra examinations are examinations that you have to take outside of your school. And so, for example, if you are applying for law, you have to take the LNAT. If you're applying for medicine, you have to take the BMAT or the UK CAT. And also, seeing that many of you will be international students, you have to prove your English proficiency. So there are multiple ways you can prove your English proficiency. One is through the IELTS exam, which is the one I took. And the other way is to prove it through your IB result or your AP result for English. But seeing as when you apply for university, you won't know how well you do in your English exam at the end of the year, it's recommended that you take the IELTS just to be safe. So you know that even if you do badly in your English exam and it doesn't meet the English proficiency requirement, you'll still have the IELTS test to enable you to get a student visa. Because English proficiency is mostly for the student visa, for the visa office to grant you one. And lastly, as I talked about before, there's also the thinking skills assessment. So this is basically a series of logic questions. So this is for all people looking to apply for Oxford or Cambridge. And so, for example, the questions would, some of them ask you to do some like spatial analysis questions. So they give you a diagram and then 4 other diagrams, and they ask you which diagram would fit into the box. Or there are questions where they give you a passage and they ask you a couple logical questions, like one of those logic riddles you do, like, did Sam get, who killed Sam? Charlie, Angel, or the other friend? Like these logic riddles kind of things. So what Oxford and Cambridge are actually looking at is that they want to get into like the way you think and the way you process things. And after you take, and one thing about extra examinations is that you should really look at the ones that you should be taking, because it is recommended, other than the TSA, that you take all these exams in your junior year of high school, because in your senior year, you should really be focusing on submitting your applications and focusing your exams. And all 3 of these other examinations have a duration of 2 years. So after you take them, they'll still be accepted by the university 2 years later. So it's best to get them out of the way. And after that, you should be looking at specific course structures. So what I mean by the specific course structure is that even though, so for example, I applied for geography, and even though for both of those, for both of these universities, UCL and King's, both were geography Bachelor of Arts programs, but the university structure was very different. So after looking at the university structure, I realized that the UCL course was more lecture-based. So most of their lessons happened in a lecture setting, as you can see on the PPT slide, whereas King's College London's course focused a lot more on workshops and learning through doing. So it was like a lot more practical, and they were trying to let you learn the content through doing it yourself and experiencing it. So for me personally, call me boring, but I like it when people feed information to me. And so I really lean towards the UCL course because I really like the structure of it and really liked how I would be learning the content through classes and lectures rather than having to go to workshops. So that's why I put UCL as my second choice and King's as my third. So depending on the way you like to learn, the course structure really plays a huge part, plays into your decision. And then lastly, obviously, you have to look at the tuition fees and financial support. So money doesn't grow on trees, right? So obviously, you would still need to see how much all this education would cost you or your parents. And so, well, most courses offer individual financial support. So for example, when I applied to geography, the geography department of a lot of the schools offered financial support. And also when you apply to most universities, you're automatically considered for something called the merit scholarship. So what this is basically they offer little incentives to students that perform well academically. But there are also other financial supports and other scholarships that you have to apply to specifically. Some of them require you to give a financial statement from your bank. Some of them require you to write a little bit about yourself. It really depends. So before you apply, it's really important to check those out online.
Hi, Yo-Yo. We have a quick question from one of the parents or student. They're talking about what qualifies as to getting external funding for their education. Do you know what's the benchmarks?
Sorry, to get external funding?
Not external, financial support, essentially.
Financial support. So financial support is basically for families who don't do so well financially and might not be able to support the kid throughout the entire university course. And so it really depends on the university themselves, but all universities have a financial support program. So what you usually have to do is that you have to provide a bank statement and tell them why it is that you need them to offer financial support.
Oh, I meant more so on the grade-wise. What type of grades do you have to achieve in order to get financial support?
For the grades-wise, so you would be talking about the merit scholarships? So for the merit scholarships, it really depends according to each school again. So it depends on how prestigious the school is. For example, if you're applying to Oxford or Cambridge, they probably have really high requirements. But if you're applying for, let's say, Manchester or Newcastle, they would have lower requirements than Oxford. Yeah. But they don't specify on any of the websites.
Okay, yeah. Thanks, Yo-Yo.
And then say I'll move on to suggested criteria. So these are some of the things that I suggest that you would like to look at before you pick your universities. So first is the university culture. So what I mean by this is what kind of people are at the university and what kind of vibe does the university give you? So, for example, the University of Oxford and the University of Cambridge would be very much academic. So they would obviously focus a lot on academics and how well you do. And also they're known for being very posh and prestigious. Whereas, for example, these three universities would be, well, less academically grueling. And also, why I picked these three universities is that they were ranked for 2007 for the universities with the best student communities. And so these are the universities in UK where you would get the best student experience. And so this is something you really should consider. And then next is the student body. So the student body refers to what sort of people study at the university. So what will your peers be like? So as I said before, the University of Oxford is actually known for being very posh and being very British, if you will. So this is a photo of the graduation ceremony. And also, fun fact about Oxford and Cambridge, they actually have these yearly parties that are very glamorous, and people dress up like they're going to the Grammys. And every week in their college in particular, they have a formal meal where they're required to dress formally and go to the dining hall and have a 3-course meal with their peers. And so that's just a tradition they carry along. So that's something that really defines their college. Whereas if you're less likely to want to dress up and be all posh and British, then you might be looking towards universities in London. So as you can see from the photo of the graduation at LSE and UCL, it's very different from the photos we saw of Oxford just now. So they're a lot more laid back, and their culture is a lot more social. And one thing I would like to point out is, for example, every year they have something called the Big Freshers Icebreaker. So it started from 2009. And so what this basically is a huge party hosted at a disco in London, where every university fresher from all universities in London can join. And so basically it's just this huge party that goes from 11 to 4 a.m. And so as you can see, when you compare something like this to what I mentioned of Oxford just now, then obviously the people studying there would be very different. And so depending on your personal preference, that's another factor that you should really consider before applying. And next is the location. So different from Hong Kong, obviously, the UK is very big. So the UK has huge cities like London. They also have smaller cities like Oxford and Cambridge. They also have little towns. They also have little villages. And so it really depends on what kind of place you want to study at. So for example, if you want to study in a huge city like London, as you can see, that's a photo of LSE's campus. As you can see, it's very modern, it's very new. It gives a very techie and a very modern vibe to it. And UCL's campus is actually located at the heart of the city. It's actually beside the British Museum. And so studying at these two universities would really make you feel like you were in the heart of the city and in London. And also something special about this is that studying in London, you don't really feel like you're part of the student community of your particular college. So you wouldn't really feel like you were a student of UCL, but rather you would feel like you were a university student studying in London. And so that would be similar to, let's say, being in NYU in New York. You would feel like you were part of the huge city, but you wouldn't really get a community feel of the college. But if you were looking for more of a community feel, maybe you would look towards schools like Manchester, Durham, or Glasgow. So all three of these places are located in cities as well. So Manchester, Durham, and Glasgow are all huge cities in the UK as well. Glasgow is actually known as Scotland's 24-hour city because they have lights on for 24 hours straight. And but what's special about this is that the University of Manchester defines Manchester, and the University of Durham defines Durham, and the University of Glasgow defines Glasgow. So for example, if I was studying in the University of Manchester, I would really get a sense of community there. So even though I was in Manchester, I would feel like I was part of the student community of the University of Manchester. So that's really a college vibe that you would be going for. And lastly, if let's say you don't want to study in a huge city, you might look at somewhere like the University of Bath. So the University of Bath is a much smaller place, and you get like a very strong sense of community. So even venturing outside your university buildings, you would still feel like you were at home, because the place is so small that it would be very easy to know Bath in general. And so if you're really not into the whole bustling city thing, then you might be looking into smaller places like Bath or like Birmingham. And so when I was making my choices, I grew up in both Hong Kong and Shanghai. And so both of these cities are huge cities, and there's always something going on in those cities 24 hours straight. And it's so crowded and so busy, and everyone's always rushing around. And I loved that vibrant city feel. And so I really knew that going into university, I would like to be immersed in that same huge, vibrant city culture. And so that's why I really wanted to study in London. And that's also why that out of all 5 of my choices, 3 of them were in London. So that's something that you would really need to consider in order to enhance your university experience. Next is class size and teaching style. So I touched on this a little before, but what I mean is that different universities have very different class sizes. So for example, for LSE, as you can see in the photo here, their class size is very much bigger. So it's one teacher, one professor teaching around, like, let's say 50 students. Whereas for Oxford, the classes are a lot smaller. So for example, for Oxford Geography Bachelor of Arts this year, they only take 10 students, but there are 4 professors. So obviously, if you apply to Oxford and you got in, then you would have a lot of attention from the professor, and the professors would know you very well personally and academically, and they would give you a lot of support, a lot of guidance. Whereas if you went to LSE, where their class sizes are much bigger, your professor might not actually know you very well, and they might not give you a lot of one-to-one personal support, or you might not build like a connection one-to-one. They might not be able to help you personally and academically. So it really depends on what kind of teaching style you're more into. So that's something that really plays into it, because that's how you ensure that you get the most out of your 3 years at university. And lastly, extracurriculars. So even though you are going into university, you're not going to be studying 24/7. That's really sad. So everyone has some hobbies. And so it would be really nice to look at what clubs and societies the university you apply to offers. So I always give this example. It's pretty amusing to me, since I didn't grow up in Oxford or Cambridge. But rowing is a huge thing in Oxford and Cambridge. So people are super into rowing. So since 1829, there has been an annual rowing competition between the universities of Oxford and Cambridge rowing team. As you can see in the photo I put here, look at the amount of people standing on the riverbanks just looking at people row. So let's say you're super into rowing. So that would be a huge incentive of you applying to Oxford and Cambridge. Or another example is the Northumbrian University of Newcastle. So they're actually very famous for having a lot of Olympic athletes graduate from the university, because they have a huge sports stadium. As you can see, that's their sports central. And so they have huge gymming facilities and swimming pools, tennis courts, and things like that. So if you're very into sports, that might be a reason why you would want to apply to them. And also, for example, for Manchester, University of Manchester, they're very known for the prestigious music programs. So if let's say you were studying economics, but you still really like violin, then you might want to apply to Manchester, so you can join their string ensemble, or you could join their orchestra to continue pursuing your hobbies. So checking out what sorts of extracurriculars the university offers is really key to ensuring that you'll still have fun even though you're studying in university. So after I talk about all that, you need to find all this information. How do you research? So right now, I'll talk about some of the research methods that you'll be looking into to find all the information that I talked about just now in my previous slides. So I recommend people start thinking about universities when they enter high school. And so it would be really great to start thinking about universities starting from grade 10 and 11, because grade 12 is your last year. So in grade 12, you would be applying to university. And so in grade 10, you would start researching. Grade 11, you would get a good idea of what universities you were applying to. So first, when I was entering into grade 10, I was completely blank about all universities. The only things I knew about university were the big name universities like Oxford and Cambridge and MIT and Harvard. But obviously not everyone is made to apply to those universities, right? And so I knew I needed to do a little initial research online to kind of understand what kind of universities there are in the world to offer me, really, and what universities were good for my courses. So firstly, a really good place to look at are league tables and websites. So right now, I'll go into topuniversities.com. That's the one that I recommend you look at first. I actually have it loaded on here already. Let me make it a little bigger for you so it's a little clearer. There you go. So when you go into top universities, this is what you'll see. So first you'll see rankings. So it talks about the university rankings, the graduate employability, and there are also lots of other rankings like the best student cities, the cheapest places to live at, etc. But what we're really looking at here is the university rankings by subject. This would be for example, if you already have a university in mind. So you would click into that. And right now, to make things easier, I'll take you through the process that I went through. So I applied for geography. So geography is part of arts and humanities. So I would click view full list. And loading. So here I can see that the best university for arts and humanities is Oxford. Next would be Harvard, Cambridge, UCB, etc. So from this, I would get like a look at which universities I would be looking at and what universities are known for being really good in this major. So let's say I was super ambitious and I wanted to go to either Oxford or Cambridge. These would be my dream universities, okay? So now that I know that Oxford is first and Cambridge is second, oh, it's actually the same as Harvard. Okay, so Oxford is first and Cambridge is second. So what makes Oxford better than Cambridge? So this is where I would recommend you going on a second site. The second site is called the completeuniversityguide.co.uk. So this is specifically for the UK. So going to league tables, again, I would go into subject tables. So what's different about this website compared to the one we were on just now is that this one actually breaks down how they rank the universities. So just now I looked at arts and humanities, and they don't actually have arts and humanities in general here. So I will look at geography. Here. Oh, so on this website, it actually says that Cambridge is first and Oxford is second. Why is that? So here you can see how they rank everything. So you can see, for example, if you're really looking for graduate prospects, you can see that Cambridge has much better graduate prospects than the University of Oxford. Whereas for research quality, they also have a much better score than Oxford. Student satisfaction, however, oh, clicked into the wrong thing. Student satisfaction, however, we see that Oxford has a better student satisfaction than Cambridge. So from this, you will really be able to see which universities are best by the standards that you care about. So let's say I really wanted to find a job. So I would want the graduate prospects to be the first. So here I see that LSE has the best graduate prospects, followed by Loughborough and Liverpool Hope. So this is the way that I would go about sort of understanding what universities there are out there for me. And then after you look at those university guides, you'll have a vague idea of what universities there are, what universities UK really offers you. So after that, I had around 20 universities in mind, at that time after I looked at these league tables and websites. So, and then from these 20 universities, I looked at the official university websites. So right now I'll show you UCL's. So let's say after looking at all that, I was really interested in UCL because it seems like they have good graduate prospects, they are a prestigious school, and they have a very high student satisfaction rate, okay? And so I go into UCL and I want to study human geography. So I go to prospective students, load, and I look for the degree that I'm trying to look for. Geography. Okay. So Geography BA, that's the course that I'm interested in. So here I can find all the information about the course in particular. So it tells me that the application deadline is 15th of January, so they follow the normal application deadline for UCAS. I took the IB, so from here, this is where I found their program requirements. So I found out that to get a 38, as I said before, and etc. And after I look at the program requirements, here I can also look at the English language requirements and what extra examinations that I have to take. Then it goes on to the degree structure. So as I said before, here it gives me an overrun of which of how the degree is going to be structured. So from this, I can really see what kind of subjects and what kind of modules I'll be studying to see if I'm interested. Then I can see what kind of careers that I'd be looking towards if I studied human geography. So it's all on the website. And at the end, there's fees and fundings. So you can see how much it would cost you as a UK or EU student, as well as how much it would cost you as an overseas student. And here are different funding options. So what I said just now, there are certain scholarships that you have to apply to. So you can get that on their link. And there are also departmental scholarships. So that's for the scholarships for geography students in particular. And it also tells you how to apply. And so going on this website, you can really get a feel of what the course structure is like. So what's good about this is you can actually use these university websites to compare. So other than geography, I mentioned King's just now. So if I go on to King's, I can search their course. So I want to compare their geography course. So for geography, the course I'm looking for is full-time BA. So that's the same one as the UCL one. So from here, I can really compare to universities. So I can see the course details. I can see how they teach. As I said, they have a lot more of field trips and tutorials and independent study. And I can also see their entry requirements. So as just now, if I click on IB, I can see that they're a little more lenient than UCL, so it would be easier for me to get in. And so they only require 35 points. And then they don't have any required subjects. So even if I didn't take geography at a higher level, I would still be considered. And then I could also look at their fees and funding again and see how much it would cost me if I study at King's. And it also tells me, the career prospects of this particular university and many more. And so looking at the university course website is a really good way to compare the course structures and overall a lot of the required essential criteria that I talked about in previous slides. And if you're, let's say I'm satisfied with UCL's course, I'm very interested in the curriculum that it teaches. So I really want to know what kind of university UCL is, because I've got so much information and so much statistics and data, but I don't really know what kind of university it is. So I would be going on from the essential criteria to the recommended criteria right now. So I can go to UCL Home. And basically on every university website, it really gives you an idea of how the university is like as a whole. So you can look at their open days, you can see their infrastructure, you can see what it's like studying there. So you can look at their faculties and departments, their library, museums, their theater. You can look at where they are, and you can really get a real feel of what it's like. You can go to current students and you can see how it's like studying in London in particular. But keep in mind that the universities want you to go there. So essentially their entire website promotes their university. So if you really want to get some unbiased information, I suggest you go onto the world of YouTube. So on YouTube, you can really get a real feel of what the university is like. So as you know, I won't take you onto YouTube right now because I'll assume you know how to use YouTube. But as you know, there are a lot of vlogs and a lot of student videos that show you what a day in the life of, let's say, a UCL student is like, or how it's like being a university student in London, or how it is like studying at Oxford. How is the city of Durham like, or like highlights of studying in Glasgow. So going on these videos would really let you see how the city looks like itself and imagine how it would be like if you were a student there. So after getting these initial online research methods, for me personally, I narrowed my universities down to around 10. So after I got these 10 universities down, it was now my chance to narrow them to the 5 that I was applying to. So within these 10 universities, I had around 2 dream schools, around, as I said, I was a little bit different. So I had around, the rest of them were, most of them were reach schools, and I had around 2 safety schools. And so right now I really have to narrow them down from 10 choices to 5 choices. So how you do that is that you really want to go even further to know even more about the university to make sure that what you're applying to is the best fit for you. So I went to a couple university fairs for chances to meet university representatives. And so my high school, YCIS, actually, they actually host a couple of these university fairs every year. So they have university representatives fly in from the UK to talk to us about their university. And so when I met with these university representatives, usually they hand out prospectus guides, and usually they tell you a little bit about the university. And what's good is that after you do all this research online, you probably have some questions that you would want to ask them. And even if it's a very simple question like, do you recommend me taking the IELTS or do you recommend me taking the TOEFL? Many times these very straightforward answers are very hard to find online. And if you go on websites like the Student Room or Reddit, you don't know if they're actually credible. So a very fast way to get these simple answers would be actually asking the person. So, hi, you are the university representative of UCL. Do you recommend me take this exam or do you recommend me take that exam if I want to go into your school? So this is a really good way to kind of get your most pressing questions answered as quick as possible. So before you go into these university fairs, I recommend you really get a list of questions down and really note down which universities you want to look at, so to make sure that these fairs are the most productive that they can be. Next is university guidance counselors. So I don't really recommend this as your main sort of, as the source that you rely on the most, but I'll still talk a little bit about it. So for most high schools like mine, they have around 1 to 3 university guidance counselors that kind of guide the students through their application. But for example, if you have a graduating class of 200 people, but you only have 2 university guidance counselors, then obviously they're not going to know you very well personally. But even though they don't know you very well personally, they keep in mind that they have a lot of experience in the field. So they do know a lot of universities. So let's say you've gone through all that research and you were completely in the dark. And so you go ahead and ask them, I want to study in London and I want to do something related to science. What kind of university should I look into? So then they might tell you, oh, maybe you should look into UCL, you might look into Imperial, you might look into Queen Mary, you might look into the University of Kings. And so with these random names in mind, you could start your research. So there's someone you can turn to if you have a vague idea, but you want some extra information about what's different between universities. But if you really want to have a more personal touch to your recommendations, I really suggest you talk to previous or current students, because previous or current students applying or studying at those universities, they're going to have the most up-to-date and relevant information. And what's different from them with the university representatives is that they're not paid to do marketing. They're not going to sell you their university. They're going to give you the real information 100%. So let's say if I was interested in both UCL and King's, then I would go find a student who was studying at UCL, and I would ask them, so what is it like studying in UCL? How do you like the life there? What are the people like there like? What do you like about London? And so they would tell me their daily life, their daily routines, the things they do on weekends. And so that would really enable me to get a close-up feel of how it would be like to study at those places. Or if, let's say, I had also a friend at King's, I would be like, hey, I looked online and I really like the program at King's, but I don't know if it's the right fit for me. Do you think it's the right fit for me? And so if they know that you're someone who's super academic and super hardcore, and let's say you're really into rowing and you're also really into snorkeling, but none of these things are offered at King's, they might be like, oh, but King's might not be very suited for you because it's in a very big city, and also they don't offer things like snorkeling and rowing. So maybe you would look at another university. So this is actually the best way, I think, to get a real feel of the universities that you are interested in, because online and through university prospectus, really the most information you can get are the statistics and also the course structures. So that's very much of the bland and dry information. But if you really want to know how living there is like and studying there is like, going to previous or current students is your way to go. And well, how to find these university students, you either know them by friends or even MAST Education. MAST Education has a huge platform of university tutors. Their tutor mentors are all from universities worldwide, so it would be very easy to find university students who would be able to tell you about King's, who would be able to tell you about Canada, US, Australia, Hong Kong. So yeah, you have that right at your doorstep.
Thanks, Yoyo, for the advertisement there. Okay.
And so that's basically how I ended up narrowing down from 20 choices to 5 choices for my UCAS applications. And so now I'm open to any questions I might have, and any questions you might have. And also I hope that made applying to the UCAS and picking your schools a lot more clearer for those of you that are starting to think about that. Thank you.
Yoyo, we have 3 questions. And again, if any participant wants to send us any questions, send it through WeChat, WhatsApp, or there's a Q&A button at the very bottom.
Yes.
Okay, so the first question is, what is the hardest part of the application process for UCAS in terms for your own application process?
So as I said before, the entire application happens online, and it's actually very, very straightforward. And the only part that really took quite a lot of time was the personal statement. So the personal statement is actually the only piece of information that really takes thinking. So the rest of it is like your passport details, where you went to university, what your mom's name is called, what your dad's name is called. But the personal statement is something you really have to write. And so before I wrote my personal statement, I looked online to look at what other people wrote about. So in my personal statement, as I mentioned before, I talked about my experiences in MUN and my experiences in newspaper articles and why I liked geography so much. And also the personal statement, also you have to make sure that the personal statement makes you sound professional, because that's where they start to know like what kind of person you are, how you speak, how you write. And so that's the part that would take you the most time.
Just quickly, can you go back to the initial slide with your profile so that people can see it? Because I think we missed that at the very get-go.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So the other question is the personal statement. If you're applying for different universities, how do you address the personal statement?
Usually universities aren't too picky on personal statements, but it does play a huge part of it. So let's say you're applying to 5 schools, and so you would tailor your personal statement to your first and second choices, as I mentioned before. So, for example, I applied to Oxford and UCL as my first and second choices, and so both of those universities really wanted me to focus academically. And so my personal statement was very much academic, talking about the things I do in school and the things that support the subjects I take in school. Whereas my other choices, so Edinburgh actually wanted me to talk more about my extracurriculars and also about my volunteer work and what sort of person I was. So I touched on that a little bit in my personal statement, but I don't really focus on that because what you really want to do is you want to make sure that your first and second choice universities really like your personal statement. So you do that and you hope for the best for the other 3.
Got it. We have a question from, the question is in regards to the TSA. I don't know if you're comfortable with sharing your score.
Fun fact, you don't actually get to know your score to the TSA.
Yeah.
Yeah, you take it and then it gets sent to Oxford or Cambridge, and if they think your score is satisfactory, they invite you for interview.
And
so you never get to know your score.
And how did you prepare for the TSA?
Well, for the TSA, it's split into 2 parts. So the first part is a multiple choice part of, if I remember correctly, 50 questions. So these are the logic questions that I talked about. And then the second part was a writing part. And so you got 3 topics. Most of them would be, they're all like opinion panel topics. So what do you think about this current event? Or what do you think about technological advances in our 21st century? And so the writing part you really cannot prepare for. The writing part is just there so that the universities can get an idea of what kind of person you are and how you think. But then the logic part, the multiple choice part, you can sort of prepare for by doing past papers. So on the TSA website, there are example questions. But again, it is actually very hard to prepare for the TSA because it relies on logic. So you can't suddenly improve your logical thinking, really. So kind of just hope for the best.
Another question is, in your personal opinion, do you think the personal statement affects your competitiveness to get into the university?
Yes, your personal statement actually affects your how competitive you are a lot, because other than your scores, so for example, if let's say you were applying to Oxford, and so the applicants, so for my course program, the subject requirement score was 41. And so everyone applying would already be doing very well academically. And so the rest of the application would pretty much be the same. And so the only thing that would make you stand out from the person who got predicted of 42 here and the person who got predicted of 42 there would be your personal statement. So yes, it's very important to do well on that.
Another question is, which UK university is the most academic focused out of King's College or UCL? And which schools in the UK are more balanced and not just academically focused?
I'm sure this is the same for all US universities, even though I didn't really research into that. But something special about the UK universities is that how well the school is, like in that degree, really depends on the degree themselves. So for example, King's College is very well known for their dentistry program. So to get into dentistry for King's, you would have to do very well, and it would be very competitive every year. And it would be very prestigious to have graduated from King's College Dentistry, whereas studying, let's say, business management at King's would be a lot easier because they're a lot less known for their program. So academic-wise, it really depends on what subjects you're doing. Yeah.
How about more humanities, not humanities, sorry. How about something that's more humanities based, like for a liberal arts program?
Liberal arts program. Oh, so actually well, according to University League rankings, so this is all the information that I talked about, how like the initial research that you should be doing on university league tables. And so one of the best liberal arts programs in the UK is actually the University of Durham. They're very well known for their liberal arts program, and they have a lot of choices that you can tailor according to your own likings.
Okay. Well, that's the end of the questions. If parents have or students have any other questions, do feel free to say it right now, or we can get them answered later. Thanks again, Yo-Yo, for your time. It was very informative.
Thank you for having me.
I certainly learned something new. Good luck in your studies at the UK, and travels tomorrow. And if if any parents want to ask any more questions, oh, sorry, there was one last question: is where do you take the TSA?
Oh, there are a bunch of different centers worldwide. So I studied high school in Shanghai, and so my school was actually enlisted as an official center, test taking center for the TSA, so I could actually take it in school. And so if you're in Hong Kong, let's say you could just go online to the TSA website when you register, and it'll tell you all the acceptable venues there are. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks a lot for your time, Yo-Yo, and again, good luck on your studies in human geo.
Thank you.
Okay, have a good night.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye, everyone.